Okay guys, I just thought of something else, so I'm going to try to make part 2. I'll try to make this as quick as possible. But basically, I've seen people say things along the lines of, being a sex worker prevents men from being abusers or sexually assaulting a woman. And I just want to explain to y'all why that is. Actually, the opposite is true. So there is actually more studies that show the more that a man watches porn, the more likely they are to engage in violence against women. So as I stated previously, the more a man watches porn, the more they begin to objectify women, and continually watching it pretty much just leads to an overall objectification of women. They view women as sexual objects who serve no purpose than pretty much fueling their lustful sexual desires. So this idea or concept that being a sex worker is to help decrease the number of men who are abusing women, or it's like, oh, this is lessening the amount of men who are going to SA, is actually false. It actually creates more of a problem for women. And that's why I personally feel like the sex industry is harmful to both men and women. I don't think women in the sex industry are really benefiting. I feel like we glorify it now because, being on OnlyFans, sexualizing yourself seems to get rewarded. We tell women, if you do these things. But the hard truth is that these women are the most degraded by men. They are the least respected by men. And so it's like, you can say, it's empowering and all of these things, but there's so many people who have to leave that industry because of how harmful it is to their mental health. They get they're constantly being degraded. They get stalkers and all of these other things. Like, no one's ever in that industry for a very long time, and if they are, it's usually either because they don't feel like they can do anything else or get out, or it also could be correlated directly to like sex trafficking, because at the end of the day, a lot of women who are sex workers were trafficked into it, and then they normalize, oh, now I'm doing it to empower me, or this is just, that becomes their normal. And it's sad to even think about, but a lot of women are forced into being sex workers through sex trafficking. So let's not glorify that people in that industry are doing it to empower themselves. Maybe there's people who do get into it and feel like it's empowering them. I personally, again, still think like, even if someone individually feels empowered, I feel like overall it has a negative impact on both men and women. And I also don't think it's really benefiting that woman to be in the sex industry. Not also because it's like you're being exposed to who knows how many, and I get that there's testing and all of those things that are done within it, but I still think, it's it really puts a lot of women in very dangerous positions being in the sex industry. I don't want to think about how many of those women have probably been SA'd at some point. And also, another thing that doesn't get talked about is that oftentimes, and I don't know the statistics on how often it is, but there are women who have been SA'd who go into sex work in order to get some sort of control back, power, to feel like they have some sort of control back over their bodies. And to them, they think it's empowering to choose to sleep with men after that power they felt was taken away with them. So I do also think like there's a lot of people who struggle with sex addictions or things like that who were at one point victims of SA at one point. So understanding that, of course, I can have a lot of empathy, care those types of women and understand why to them it feels like it's empowering. But again, at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, these women are being degraded for money. They're being objectified for money. If they're sex trafficked, they're not even making money. They're making another man money. And literally, you're fueling men's lustful desires for women. You're feeding the fire of men disrespecting women and then being upset that men disrespect women. Like, you know how, this whole huge point of contention in, the feminist movement is, men don't respect women and we're viewed as objects. And at the same time, the woman industry tries to teach women that they need to, it's empowering to sexually objectify themselves. So it really doesn't make sense that, in one breath you can say it's women shouldn't be sexually objectified, women should be respected by men, but then at the same time promote women sexually objectifying themselves and degrading themselves for men's lustful desires at the end of the day. And I get the argument, there wouldn't be if there wasn't a demand, we wouldn't need to supply. But it's just like providing the supply for the demand is not necessarily helping either. So, of course, this is a very nuanced topic where you can go into a lot of different ideas or concepts for it. But me personally, I don't think the sex industry is helpful, beneficial to, or empowering to women. And I wouldn't encourage someone to be in the sex industry. Personally, I wouldn't. I think people often show, because there's people who are like, there's influencers now who basically promote the fact that they're on OnlyFans, promote their sexual things online on their platform, and pretty much normalize it for young girls, and then show like, oh, I live this glamorous life and I do all of these glamorous things, but they're not showing the full side of it or the reality of it or the mental health. And personally, I knew women who were strippers when I was in cosmetology school, and the stories that they tell me, like how they got degraded. They were making a lot of money, but they were miserable mentally, and it leads a lot of women to getting on drugs in order to cope with the constant degradation they put themselves in, or positions that they put themselves in. And it's also just not putting yourself in a safe position. You're literally fueling the most predatory types of men on the planet. When you are in the sex industry, you are surrounding yourselves with nothing but sexual predators. These are not men who respect women. These are not men who care for women. These are men who lust after women, who objectify women, who believe women's bodies are objects to fulfill their sexual fantasies. These men do not like these women. They do not respect these women, except for what they do to fulfill their sexual lustful desires. Like I said, all of this is still rooted in the spirit of lust and a lustful spirit that these men and women can also suffer from, right? So it's like men can be lustful, but so can women. There are women who do porn because they just love having sex and sleeping around, right? I'm not going to sit here and say like it's only men who lust after women's bodies. There can be women who struggle with lust as well, and maybe that's why they end up in that industry. But at the end of the day, being having a lustful spirit is not aiding that person, in my opinion. So that's what I have to say about that. If you don't agree, that's fine. That's, like I said, this is my personal take, my personal opinion. I'm biased to my faith as a person, but it's also just like, this is me just rationalizing probably a little too hard, as I typically do. But there's so many issues around sex. At the end of the day, it's just like sex outside of a loving, committed relationship causes so many problems. You know, you have sexual assault, you have sex trafficking, you have just all of these. There's so many issues, I feel like, that happen when you take sex out of the parameters that God intended it for. But there's just also so many unwanted consequences. And I think, like, it's easy, and I understand why people say, like, well, people should be able to sleep with whoever they want. It doesn't affect anyone but them. And, you know, people can do whatever they want with their own bodies. And if a woman wants to sleep around, she can, and it doesn't mean anything. And, you know, men get to sleep around with no repercussions. So why can't women do that too? And it's just like, instead of seeing the problem that, you know, sleeping around is not necessarily something you should strive for. It's just like, well, if men can do it, why can't women? Instead of looking at it from like, is what these men are doing, is the men sleeping around beneficial to society? You have men creating multiple broken homes because they can't keep in their pants. You think that's what we want to take from what men are doing, is now women can also just do the same thing? And then we have moms with multiple baby daddies, you know? And I'm not saying this to belittle, put down women, but I'm just saying overall, we're not looking at the problem from, in my opinion, the best perspective. It's more so just, oh, if men can't do it, why can't women? Like, but who said what the men are doing is even what is good for society? It was even benefiting anyone, you know? And like I said, it's just like, we already know that there's so many issues that arise from having sex outside of a loving, committed relationship. And if you know that, it creates all of these issues, you know? And I'm not saying sex can be consensual and still problematic. Think about men who cheat on their wives who cheat on their husbands or their partners, like I said. But I feel like, to me, it's most harmful. I feel like cheating on a partner is always wrong, but I feel like, think of how many marriages have ended because of infidelity, right? Relationships end because of infidelity, but I think specifically of like marriages because I feel like I can't talk too much about it because there's so much I can say, but basically, the purpose of sex is, see, if I get into it, I'm not gonna be able to stop. Okay, but basically, the purpose of sex is to connect two people. Biblically speaking, two people becoming one. But when you think about that, as soon as you sleep with someone outside of the relationship you're in, you are betraying that person. And it's like, if sex was just like, why would sex be something that would break someone's commitment to you if it wasn't something strong enough to create that connection? You know, like, why would that be like the most the biggest betrayal in a relationship if sex wasn't important or is so meaningless and doesn't mean anything? So I just think people don't just realize. I feel like, I personally always think about overall implications. I make a lot of generalizations, as some people have pointed out, because I'm not going to argue with, you know, every individual instance of things. I'm going to think about in general or overall, what does this mean for our society? I think it also comes from me minoring in sociology, which is just about how societal norms and whatever affect the world around us. Anyways, in general, I'm speaking in general. I'm not speaking about every person's specific situation. I know that there's nuances with everything that I say. There are always going to be individual stories that differ from some of the problems that I speak to. Not everyone wants to get married. Not everyone cares about certain things. Not everyone feels like they are losing something, or not everyone is going to take the same opinion I have of it. But essentially, this is me sharing my personal thoughts on it, why I personally don't support the sex industry, and why I think it's harmful, like I said, to men and women. And I also think it just aids in the worsening disrespect men have towards women. And also I feel like women's respect for themselves seems to be like in the depths of hell. I'm so sorry, but I swear, I personally feel like women tolerate too much crap from men, and I just can't understand it. But maybe it's just so many women are used to getting the bare minimum. I don't know. I know I have high standards, y'all, and I've said it in multiple videos, but I really just, like I said, I don't understand how some of y'all tolerate the things I be hearing or seeing men do on a daily. So I will make more videos. If y'all have any specific topics you want me to cover, or like a specific situation, comment down below and I'll do my best to make videos around certain topics if you guys want to hear my opinions on more of that stuff, because I do feel like this is an issue that I personally find to be very important, and I also think it doesn't get talked about enough. So yeah, I'm also at Sonic, by the way.